let's go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Gerald Versluis, actually working as an engineer at Microsoft after years of experience with working with Azure, ASP.NET, DevOps and Xamarin. And other technologies. He's now involved in a number of different projects, and he's been building several real-world apps and solutions. Not only does he like to code, but he's also passionate about spreading his knowledge and as well gaining some in the bargain. So welcome, Gerald.
Thank you so much. It's so very awkward to hear your own written biography about yourself.
Yeah. It's actually like 90% of your biology. Yes, it is.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
Are you doing in the current situation?
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. You know, under the circumstances, of course. I have been working from home before it was cool, so that is great. But to be honest, I'm very glad that I had that head start. I've been working about a year from home before the whole working from home lockdown COVID stuff. I don't know how else I would have gotten used to that, but you know, we're all still healthy. No incidents yet, so all good.
All right. Yeah, I heard when you started at Microsoft, you even started without personally meeting your teammates. It was all virtual.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think you're pretty much familiar with the current situation, although it's not funny anymore.
No, definitely not.
All right. So I'd say take the stage. You're going to tell us about Codespaces, which is really awesome. I'm really looking forward to your session. So I'd say stage is yours.
All right, very cool. So Codespaces, that's what we're going to talk about. I would have hoped that I could still see this screen, but I can't. So, all right, we'll manage. So Codespaces is going to be developing from your iPad, your browser, VS Code, or basically whatever you want. So you've probably heard about it a number of times now, maybe under the name of Visual Studio Online, Visual Studio Codespaces. Well, naming is hard, especially at Microsoft, and it has a couple of names, but now it is GitHub Codespaces. That's what we settled for. That is what it's going to be. So there you have it. I'm going to tell you all about it in this session. So Eduard already gave me a little introduction. I already prepared a slide for this as well. So my name is Gerald. I am actually from the Netherlands, and I worked at some point for 4Dotnet. So, you know, anything can happen. You can find me on Twitter mostly, so if you have any questions afterwards, find me there. Email address there as well, so you know if you're not happy with doing it in public, you can also send me an email. You can find all my handles, which is a lot: Instagram, Facebook, all the things, GitHub. You can find that on jversluis.dev, which is you know, very hip and happening, a domain name. And I'm trying to do some things on YouTube as well. So you're watching this on YouTube, maybe. So go ahead, go check out that channel, click that subscribe button while you're there anyway. As Eduard already mentioned, I am working at Microsoft. I am now at the Visual Studio, the GitHub Codespaces team. See, I still need to get used to it myself. But before this, I've done a lot with Xamarin. So also, you know, if you want to know about that, then hit me up on any of these things. So a little thought experiment, right? If you get into a new job, how quickly can you get to coding? Or maybe if you think about a open source project, how quickly can you get to coding? It's usually a long time, right? Relatively. So you will need to get your machine and log in. Azure directory setup. Okay, we're not going to help you with that. That is something that your IT person is still going to have to do. But you know, even then, if you have the machine, if everything is set up, you can log in finally, then you know, you still have to get that machine just right. You have to install Visual Studio, and it's much smaller now with the different workloads, but it's still several gigabytes. And maybe your internet connection at home isn't great. Maybe you upgrade it now with all the working from home, but you know, it's might not still be the line that you have in the office. So things are coming in slowly. You have to get all the tools, all the SDKs, then you have to get it building. It's just a hassle. So that is the thing that we're trying to solve. And think about all the other scenarios, right? This is just one of them, but contributing to open source usually is requires a specific use case, a specific setup your environment as well, which might break the environment that you're currently working on professionally. So that conflicts, right? That's something that you don't want to do. So how great would it be to just have some kind of throwaway environment that you can set up just to contribute to that one OSS project, or maybe just the Microsoft Docs. That's also a good thing that you can contribute to. You just want to fix that one typo that keeps you up at night. You've spotted it, and now you have to fix it. But you don't want to pull the whole thing down, do all the things, or maybe one last scenario. Then I can keep talking about this. You'll notice. One other scenario, maybe you want to do a interview with a candidate that's going to work at your company. Now, all of this is now more current than ever with the whole COVID situation, right? Because you have to do all these things remotely. So how cool would it be to just spin up an environment, look at it together through live share, and see what kind of code that person is writing, and not just be able to just, validate it from a notepad perspective, but also be able to see if it compiles, how it behaves, do all the things. Well, that is all things you can do with Codespaces and a lot more. Now, to properly explain what this all is, we probably need to establish first, like, what is a dev environment, right? Because it's a lot of things together. It's not just the tools, it's not just the source, but it's the editor. So Visual Studio Code, maybe you like Paint and you do things in Vim. I don't know, maybe you do. You have the source, so that's the actual code you're building. You have the runtime. So, I mean, not only naming is hard, but runtimes are hard too. .NET Standard, .NET Core, .NET Framework, .NET all the things. And don't even start about, all the other things that are out there. It's not just Microsoft, there's a whole other things as well, with all kinds of versions and things that all have to fit together to get your solution to build. Then you have the debugger, right, that has to attach. You have the packages, so your third-party libraries, your NuGets, your NPMs, all those kinds of dependencies that you need to pull in with specific versions probably for this to work. Then you have other tools and extensions. I kind of feel that's the same thing. So maybe ReSharper is a thing, right? You maybe want to use that, or you have some other linting tools if you're more into the web environments and that kind of stuff. So you probably have some tools and extensions that you're using left and right. So those are also things that are part of your dev environment. And the terminal, I feel that is, back, or has it never been gone? I don't know. But the terminal, like the new Windows terminal, that looks very awesome, very powerful. Just tick, tick, tick. I'm actually considering, this has nothing to do with this session, I'm actually considering getting a small screen down here. I saw that the other day on Twitter with just a dedicated terminal, because it's awesome. And it looks like you're a professional hacker or something. So if you have that, please let me know in the chat, and I'll be happy to talk with you some experience. But terminal also back in the system. So, people are using that a lot. So what we're trying to do with GitHub Codespaces is take all that away and make you focus on the project and the code that you want to write, and that you are a happy customer, and you just dive into that code in under seconds. Okay, maybe minutes in some cases, but never more than a minute, 2 minutes, so that you can just do that, get in, do the code, boom, mic drop, and you get out. So that's how coding is supposed to be. You just want to focus on the code you're writing, and not all the other things, right? So that's what you want to do. So then, if we project that to what is Code's environment, right? So it runs in the cloud. If that wasn't obvious yet, this all runs on. Well, this story gets kind of weird, because I last did a talk with this when it was still Visual Studio Codespaces, but it's no secret that this all runs on Azure, right? It all runs on the cloud, and it's a managed environment. So you just have to worry about the bits that you want to be worried about, because like most Azure services, you can start at the top, not worry about anything like Azure Functions, or if you want to worry about things a little bit more, then you can dig in a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper into the service, and the more you start configuring yourself, the more control you have, but also the more things that you have to account for yourself. But in the very core, you can just spin up that environment, not worry about anything, just your code. And you will feel right at home. So if you see this screenshot right here on this slide, it probably looks very familiar if you are a VS Code user. And I've seen a couple of sessions today. I think also some people in the chat were like, yay, VS Code. To be very honest, I'm not a big VS Code user, but it is a awesome tool. So I'm a VS Code user basically as a replacement of Notepad. That's the only things I do with it, just the plain text things and some incidental projects. But you know, I'm not doing my big C# projects from VS Code, but you can if that's what you want. And this should look probably familiar. And if you are a Visual Studio Code user, then you will feel right at home because it is a full-blown VS Code client. I think at some point before Codespaces existed, VS Code was already like in some kind of web variant already available, and this is now fully integrated with Codespaces. So you have the complete client. I think all the features are there, and you can start developing from anywhere because this runs in the browser. It doesn't look just familiar like VS Codespaces, but if you look closer, then you can see this is running in Safari on a Mac. So who would have thought that, right? Like 10 years ago. This is crazy on a Mac. Develop from anywhere, and I think we're investing also heavily on making this run on an iPad. I think you can do it today. There are a couple of things to work out still, but you can do this on an iPad. So that's another scenario, right? You're on vacation. You have that iPad. Things start breaking in production. You do have to make a choice. You will make your partner probably very angry because you pop out that iPad and instead of starting Netflix, you're starting your IDE to start coding. So you're going to get in trouble. But fire in production or making your wife unhappy. Tough choices. So you can develop from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection, right? So you can just get to that browser. You could just bring a thin client, just your tablet. You can write code and commit it and do all the things right from there. Collaboration all around. I mentioned it already quickly. This works together on live share. So you can also start a live share session with this. So if you have someone else halfway around the world and you're just on your tablet, but you need a little bit more, get on that live share session. And do that. So for the people who don't know what live share is, that is like the integrated client extension kind of thing, where you can just, you can have multiple cursors, see which person is which cursor, and you can write code together, which will update in real time. Very cool. All info on github.com features/codespaces. So let's just have a look at that. Pop this back here. And this is the site. So maybe a little disclaimer. Maybe I should have started with that because everything I'm showing you today is still in preview. Sorry about that. The good news is you now know a guy who might get you, up on that list a little bit higher. Maybe you already signed up, but it's not moving along. I don't know. Maybe you know someone that you should subscribe on his YouTube channel, and he could, move you up in the list. So here's the website with all the features. This is the URL that I just linked you to. This will give you like all the things that I just told you, but with a little bit nicer graphics, simplify your workflow, yada, yada, yada. All good. So I'm just going to show you this. But if you want to join this, sign up for the beta, request early access, you can get on the list. And there is two separate things that I will show you. One of them is GitHub Codespaces, which is like the integrated GitHub experience. And the other thing is GitHub Codespaces for Visual Studio. So for the actual Visual Studio for Windows client. And I'm going to show you that as well. So, but that is a separate thing, and you can sign up at this point, I think. So this is just the integrated GitHub scenario for now. So there's a little Q&A here at the bottom, and I think something that is of interest of a lot of people is how much is it going to cost me? So in the preview stages, as most things, this is going to be free, but as at some point this is going to be launched, and it is in the cloud, so it's going to cost you something, a fraction of all the machines that you would have to buy whenever you need this kind of power. But you can find a little bit about the pricing here. Of course, that's going to change because right now it's only based on Linux machines that are available in GitHub right now. So there's more to come there, but you will have at least some indication of the costs right there. All right, so I can see my chat right now. Let me just scroll over this. Nothing here. Were they talking about Gerald? Glitch in the video matrix. Okay, nothing here. So let's move on. If you then go to github.com/codespaces, then you will get this screen with less options because I have a couple more options. But this is basically what you'll get. You'll get a list of the code spaces that you might have already in here, or you can create a new one. So you can do a couple of things here. You can create a new one from here, and you can choose a repository that is part of your account, and then after that choose a branch and create it from here. Or you can do it the other way around, which is maybe even cooler. And that is whenever you just, you find some repository in the wild. This is one that is in my account as well. But, if I go to, I don't know, Xamarin Community Toolkit on the Microsoft Docs, I can go in here as well. And, I just want to fix something in the docs. And you have this code button, right? So you have this already today if you are browsing on GitHub, but you have a couple of options. So open it with GitHub Desktop, which is a nice client as well. Open with Visual Studio. I'm not sure if that is an option today for you. And download zip. So yeah, and of course the instructions to just clone it with your favorite client that you might have in that terminal that I mentioned. But if you are enrolled in like the Codespaces thing, then you also have the options to open with Codespaces. And the really cool thing here is that you can just say, okay, do a new Codespace, boom, and it will create it for you. Even if this is this repo is not in your account, it will. If you do not have write access, it will create a fork for you automatically, set up all the things so you can contribute back to the original repository, open a pull request on that one. So that is really cool. A little bit more on that later. But now let's just start with my own repository right here. So the same thing, code, open with Codespaces, no active one. So maybe you have an active one for this repository already lying around. And you can choose, do I want to use that one? Maybe it has some changes that you need to dive back into. Or maybe you want to create a new one because you're going to work on another feature. All possible. I'm just going to create a new Codespace from right here. So click, boom, and this you're again going to see like this top bar. That's not something that you're going to see. These are some things that are specific to me. But you can see some progress here, some installing, some cloning of whatnot. But within I don't know 30 seconds to a minute, there should be a full-blown VS Code client here in my browser with my code ready to go. Shameless plug by Gerald Versluis. Here's his channel. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Subscribed. Yes, thank you, Johan. High five. All right. So we're waiting for this to happen. What else can I talk about? So Linux and Windows, right? This is all the things that are in GitHub right now that you're going to see whenever you're using this preview. This is all in Linux. And the things that you're going to create from Visual Studio 2019 on Windows, those are Windows machines. Those are full-blown VMs, which is really cool if you think about it, because what's happening is that they're also preparing Visual Studio for this. So what's going to happen is that Visual Studio 2019 is going to be basically a thin client in this scenario, and the actual engine is going to run on that VM, doing all the heavy lifting for you. And so they have separated basically Visual Studio in some kind of client server scenario right here. And that's going to be really cool. But I can imagine, I'm not sure, I'm not involved in that kind of level of product management, but I can imagine that from GitHub you can also start choosing for Windows environments and whatnot, and you can open them from Visual Studio, because that's all that we want to do, right? Like you want to start in environment this, and whenever you get behind your real desktop, your powerful desktop machine, you can go to Visual Studio. So I'm not sure if we're already have decided on how that's going to look like, but there will be solutions for that. Okay, so I've talked long enough for this VS Code to come up here in my browser, which is really cool. So the terminal that I mentioned, here we go. It wishes me a have a nice day. I'll get back to that in a little bit, but I have an integrated terminal right here. So for Linux, this is not a VM, this is just a container. I think Erwin in the previous session already mentioned something about containers as well. So this is just a container, so very lightweight, you can spin it up, no problem. And you can do all the things here. So this is actually my repository right here. I can press, that's interesting. I can press tab for the, oh, I didn't go out of here, right. I can press tab to, just have it suggest the rest of the path for me. You can see all the files that were also in the repository. Oh, this opened in the actual repository, but you can see all the things here. And I also have Git, and Git is already configured with all my GitHub credentials because I was logged into GitHub, right? So everything is set up. Right now, I can just start coding. So live VS Code, everything here on the left is the same as you would expect it on VS Code. And I can actually just, go in here to my little debug tab, click run, and it will start building. You can see it again in the terminal down below. And it will start building all these things, and it will come up with the actual product that is running. And in this case, it's a very simple ASP.NET Core application, which has a little funny thing in there. I think it has, you can see the pop-up is blocked. So let me allow this one. See if I can still get it. No. Open in browser. Okay, there we go. So it also gave me a little thing there. So you can see that this is a funny URL, right? Because I'm in the browser, so we need to do a little trick to actually get the content from our running Docker container and pipe that over through also the browser to here. So this is a demo I did earlier on the SDN cast, which you might know, which is a webcast. But I can change this to be message is hello 4.net conf. There we go. So now it changes to this. So this is the only thing it does, right? It's not very super rocket science. This is it with AutoCAD, .NET Bot, very awesome. But you can see if that it's running here, and you can also do like, I want to change my background. Here we go, background color to red. Here we go. You can see the IntelliSense coming up. You even have a color picker. So, everything is here. And I can also, well, let's save this first. Go back to my actual running thing here, reload, and boom, it's red. So updates, real time, no problem. And also, of course, what you'd expect from your thing. I don't know how it's for you, but when I'm working, debug breakpoints are everywhere. So I can just go in to my pages right here and the index, and here I think it's going to find like, okay, whatever string is in here. So let me just put a breakpoint in here. And if I then go back here and reload that, then of course, what's not going to happen is not automatically going to switch over to the tab, right? Because that's probably a browser limitation. So normally it would switch back to Visual Studio automatically, but that's not something that we can do here. But in your tab, you can see this little red bubble popping up, notifying you that it's now in a breakpoint. So here it is. And you can inspect all these variables like you normally would. So here is the message. You can see what the message actually is, what the count is, static result view. You can do all the things. So all the IntelliSense, all those things are just here. This is a full-blown client with all the things inside of here. So that is very, very cool. I can just press play here. It will continue, and it was still red. So let's actually, well, let's keep it red. That's cool. Let's do that. Because I made a change now, and let's stop running this. And what I can then do is go back to my terminal. You can start another one if that's what you want, and I can say git status, and you can see that this is modified. So all the git things are here. You can also do npm, I think. npm not found. Okay, you can't do npm, but you can install that, right? So that's no problem. Is Docker installed? I think no. Okay, so this is shouldn't have done this. This is not a good demo. But there's a couple of tools. I think I don't know. I'm not sure why they're not here now. Or you can at least install them yourself if that's what you need. But I can also immediately do git commit, give it a nice message, change background. Here we go. Oops, git add first, of course. Oh, come on. Nothing added? Git add dot. There we go. Git commit, change background, git push, do all the things. There we go. And now if I go back to my .NET Web repository, you can see here that it changed 11 seconds ago. See, so I didn't need to enter my username, didn't need to configure my Git account. It's just there. It's just working. So that is very cool. All right, what more? I told you about if I spawn a new terminal again, the have a nice day. And I promised you that you would feel right at home. Your environment would look and feel the way that you would if you're running this on a desktop. So there's different ways how you can do that. So one of them is with the settings sync. I think that is relatively new. With that settings sync, you can, as the name implies, sync settings over VS Code instances, but not just Codespaces, also your VS Code Desktop. So I have it on for my account. Whenever you turn it on, you need to link it to some account, and you can also say like, okay, I want to do themes and opened files, and you have a couple of options that you do or do not want to sync. But if I pop open my VS Code here on my desktop, and you can see I'm running on a Mac, so VS Code is everywhere. That's really cool. You can see it's like the exact same experience. It looks the same. And the really cool thing, what I can do now is whenever I set my theme here, that is something that I want to sync. So let's set it to, pretty red, and everything turns red. And then if we wait a couple of seconds, then you can see my desktop client also turns to red. So this is near real time. My settings are synced for all the settings that are in here. So, you can go to the settings here as well. I don't know, boop settings. All these settings are things that, will be synced whenever you've enabled that. And it also works the other way, of course. So whenever I switch back here to, Visual Studio Light theme, it will take a second and it will pop up in the screen behind here as well. So that is one of the things that will make your experience more personal. Update. Thank you. That will make it personal, and this also works for extensions. I think it also syncs extensions. So that is something that you don't even need to think about it. It just happens whenever you have enabled this. So that is very cool. Another way that you can do this is the so-called dot files, and that is how my have a nice day gets in here. So the dot files is a concept that is more known within like the Linux ecosystem because it refers to like the files that have a dot in front of them, right? So if I go to ls-al, see, here you go. We have the def container, we have the git, github, gitignore, all the files with that dot in front of it, which are not visible normally. They hold in Linux normally a enormous amount of configuration and settings and that kind of stuff. So I've implemented this for Windows as well to, use your NuGet package feed, for instance, or do some other things. Maybe you run a PowerShell script that will initialize a couple of things. But these dot files will be picked up automatically whenever you have like a repository called dot files in your GitHub account. So you can set up that dot files repository, and you can use that to customize your environment locally whenever you get a new machine and you say pull down those dot files, run some kind of initialization script, and everything looks and feels the way you want. You can create aliases for your terminal. You can give your terminal a certain background if that's what you want. Do whatever. That's all things you can do with the dot files, and that will also work in your terminal on your Codespace. So did I have, I already have it open here, so that's great. So here I have my dot files repository, which is very, very minimalistic, just as I like it. And I only have the bash RC. So this is kind of like bash is the terminal on Linux, the default one. And the bash RC file is kind of like a PowerShell profile, if that means more to you. So the PowerShell profile is a piece of script that will run whenever you spawn a new PowerShell terminal. So that you can use to set up like some customization. Maybe you have like that posh git, so you have all the git status things in your terminal window as well. That's all things that you can do with it, but I chose to do something, very wild, and it will just echo, have a nice day. So you can do all the things here. That is pulled down automatically. I didn't need to set anything up for this. It will just look into your account like, hey, is there a dot files thing? You should check the documentation, because there are a couple of like, by naming convention. So maybe it's called setup.sh. I don't know actually what the right files will be. I think I have a dot files test repository. So I think like the bootstrap .bat for batch files for Windows, install.ps1. So we have a couple of those names pre-configured because, you know, the dot files are picked up automatically. Those are copied to the right places, so the configuration will be picked up automatically. But, you know, you might want to do other things, like create certain folders or do whatever, set certain environment variables. And you can do that with a custom initialization script, which is either PowerShell, Bash script, whatever, depending on the platform that you're using. And you can configure all of that in your dot files repository. So another thing that you can see, which, you know, kind of lifts off automatically whenever you use this dot files mechanism, is the VS Code folder, because in VS Code you have the settings JSON. This is kind of, I did this early on whenever the settings sync wasn't really a thing, I think. So this is actually the same thing as the settings sync, because you can override certain settings for your VS Code instance this way. But it's probably better to use that settings sync for that. There's one other thing. Let me check. Where did I leave that repository? I closed it again. So if I go back to the .NET Web repository that I just took as an example to spin up my Codespace, you also will find the .dev container, which is a different scenario all by itself. So if I go into that, you can see there is a Docker file. So you can provide a Docker file that is used to create the actual container for that is used to create your Codespace. So you could do all your configuration in that. I will admit right now that Docker is not something that I use very often, but if you do, then probably this configuration will you know, look familiar to you. You can lock it to .NET Core 3.1. You can install Node, which didn't work apparently because I couldn't use npm. You can install Azure CLI, you can set the working directory, you can do all these kinds of things. So, you know, you can just spin up that Docker file, pull in all the configuration, how you want your environment to look like. You could do that inside of your Docker file. Also, you have the dev container. So the dev container JSON also contains a lot of information about how you want to put together your environment. So we can give it a name. We can specify that we want to build it with this Docker file. We have to specify a couple of arguments that we can do here. And this is also very interesting. So you can also do this extensions thing. And this will install the extensions on your VS Code. To be very honest, don't ask any questions in the chat. I'll keep my eye on that. I don't know how it works, like putting together these extensions, and if someone forces a extension on you through this, that it will automatically sync to your local one. That sounds very weird to me, so I would expect it not to work that way. But if I, you know, think back to that Microsoft Docs example, I think they have set it up, not for this one, but for other ones. And there is a extension that will help you write the Microsoft Docs. It will provide you with a little preview pane so you can see what it looks like, or, you know, you can, it will give you some warnings like, hey, you should format this a little bit different. And they will have that dev container in that Microsoft Docs repository, and that's automatically pulled in whenever you create a Codespace. So you have that installed because it's just a nice tool to use whenever you contribute to this OSS project. So that is very, very handy. Again, I'm not sure how that works sync-wise and how it works together with extensions that you might already have. I have my own thoughts about it, but go check it out. Let me know if you have any questions about that offline, and I'll be sure to look it up. And here you can also do a couple of settings and the forward ports. That is something that I did not touch upon because, of course, whenever you're running it here, there are maybe some ports that you might want to use, right? Because your API might run on some exotic port that you want to use. So here in VS Code, whenever you install the GitHub Codespaces extension, you will have this pane where you can manage your GitHub Codespaces here. So this is the exact list that we just saw in my GitHub environment, and you can manage them here. You can open in VS Code from here. You can delete it. You can do all the things. But you can also get the ports right here. So I can also open this one again. Yes, open it, and I will get the, oh, it's not running right now. I would get the running project if it were to run right now. But you can add ports here. You can say, hey, click on this little plus. Oh, here it's opening here, and I can say I want to open port 80, and I can also get to this through port 80 that's opened up right now. These URLs cannot be shared. I'm not sure if that is something that we're working on. So you have to be authenticated as your GitHub user to actually be able to access these URLs to, you know, access your running debug session. So that is something security-wise that you might want to know. But whenever you're running this from the desktop, so you know that's interesting too. If I go to my desktop thing right here, I have that same pane because the extension is installed. I need to log in. Here we go. I can see this one is running because I can see my actual workspace right here, and I can just say, okay, let's connect. So now it's connecting from my VS Code desktop client to that same Codespace. So that is a thing as well. And the thing that I want to show you, because here is a very cool trick that we've implemented as well, and I should be able to run this, please. No? Well, I should be able to. Do I need to open this? See, I'm not a VS Code user. It's still saying opening remote, so I'm hoping that this will come up eventually. But what you can do is run this project from here as well, of course, because, you know, .NET Core, all the things, so it's running cross-platform, so I can just run this on my Mac. And what I can then do is it loops my local host back through, you know, because the heavy lifting, the actual engine that is actually building my code is somewhere in the cloud, but it will loop back whenever you type in localhost into your browser or wherever you're trying to access it from. It will loop that to that cloud instance. You don't have to worry about anything. It will just be as if you were running this on your local machine. So you can just keep typing localhost, go to that thing, and it will just work, which I want to show you, but it's not really opening right now. So I think I saw some questions. Sync, does it work with your GitHub account? So I think the important thing for the settings thing, I think this is about, is that you link the same accounts. I think you can indeed use either Microsoft or GitHub, but I'm not sure if it's going to work like, you know, if you are logged into Microsoft at the one and GitHub at the other. At least you will have to, you know, be logged in with both at some point or have them linked or something. I'm not sure how all that's going to work. Also in the future, right? Because GitHub is Microsoft now, but, you know, not quite, and I don't know how that's going to be, but at some point maybe the accounts will be one and the same, but for now, for the settings sync, you can definitely do both. So I'm going to see if I can disconnect here because this doesn't seem to be working. All right. Not sure what's going on with this one. Let me quickly restart VS Code, and else we'll just move on to the next thing. No problem. Connecting to remote server. Okay, Codespaces, it says connected. It's popping up a little more. All right, so now I can launch it. Very cool. So here again, this is just the same project as we saw before, .NET Web. I'm starting this from my VS Code, and you can see it already has the latest changes. So that is cool, right? And you can see here, this is the thing that I really wanted to mention. I'm not sure if this Zoom is going to work properly whenever I share my screen, but you can see 127.0.0.1. So you could just go to that as if it were running on your local machine, and we will take care of all the magic to do that on your cloud hosted thing. I'm pretty sure it should also work for a local host. There we go. So it also works for a local host, right? So it works for all the things. So that is pretty cool. And also from here, because, you know, it's all the same thing. So you can also create new port forwarding things from here and do all the same things that I've just shown you. So that is cool. What else did I want to tell you? Is there any plan to do things like streaming Android, iOS in Codespaces? That would be a killing feature. Yes, and I totally want that because I like Xamarin, and that's what I want to do. But there are plans. There's always plans, but I think this is all still in preview. So I think the focus right now, again, this is above my pay grade. I don't decide on these things. So what we want to focus on now is just the terminal and the web-enabled scenarios, and also on the GitHub side, so more on the Linux side, because that was just the first integration. That is the thing that we want to get right. And then of course we have the Windows scenario where you have like more the desktop apps running emulators, running like your WinForms thing that you want to see. We are still figuring out things there. It's definitely, of course, something that we're thinking about because Windows enterprise businesses, that is a large portion of what we support, but I don't know when that's going to come right now. But it's definitely something that we're considering and working on. So stay tuned for all the latest news on that. So let me now do some magic and switch over to Windows. Oh, I need to log in. That is too bad. So here we go. Login. And here I have Visual Studio 2019. If you're wondering why this is so big, Visual Studio 2019 finally has a demo mode. You have to install an extension, but if you are a presenter and you need to show Visual Studio 2019, go check out that extension, hit me up, I will send you the link and you can install it and you can blow up the font and you won't have all the used things here that are all NDA and Microsoft secret. So that's really cool. But the other thing I wanted to show you, which is probably more important, is the connected code space. So whenever you get into this program, and again, this Windows Visual Studio program is different from the GitHub Codespaces. So this is a different program, and I think at the time being, this is private preview right now. So this is not something that you can currently enroll for, but there might be some big conference, Microsoft conference coming up. Which is the next one? Is that Ignite? I don't know. I always get confused. But anyway, there might be some news then, but I can show you today. So also something I think that wasn't there before is that we can now authenticate. Again, we have the kind of account thing going on. We can authenticate with our GitHub account here right from Visual Studio without any extensions. It's just built in. And I can do a repository URL. So let's actually take something different. Which is github.com. I don't know. Let's take something. github.com. Let's pick something nice for my account. I think, I have some kind of web thing that I was working on. So here you have it again. This is actually a private repository, so this is going to be interesting. But I'm logged into my account, so this should not be a problem, right? And here you can see you can choose the different instances. So no Linux here. This is all Windows. You can see these down here. That is good. That is something internal and specific to me. But you can see we have 4 cores, 8 GB of RAM, 8 cores, 16 GB of RAM. And I think I don't know what the flavor is going to be, but you can expect maybe whenever we have something more specific to AI applications, then you might have something with a bigger GPU in here that you can choose from. And of course, which one you choose depends on like what it's going to cost and how fast it's going to be, etc., etc. So, but I'm just going to focus on the fun stuff and not worry about cost because that's something our boss will do, right? So let's just pick this 8 cores, 16 GB of RAM. And also there's this thing comes into play, the suspend after. So you have a couple of options because whenever you're not using it, so whenever it detects like, hey, there's no activity, it's going to suspend your code space and it's going to back to storage, which will cost less than whenever the thing is, of course, running in the cloud. So that is something that you might want to tweak as well. But let's just set it to 4 hours so we can, have that long lunch break. And this breaks because the repository is not found. OK, this is interesting. This is actually a bug that I just fixed. Very interesting because dots inside the repo thing was not supported. OK, but it's apparently not in production yet. So let's just stick with the other thing that I just had, right? So let's stick with the .NET Web one. There we go. And then this should just work. So this is going to take a little bit longer because, like I said, this is spinning up like a full-blown Windows VM, but you can see it's still pretty quick. And this will just come up with Visual Studio 2019, just as you're used to it, whatever extensions you might have in here. And but right now, all the heavy lifting will be done in the cloud. So in the cloud right now, a little bit of background information, there is a Visual Studio server. So basically devent.exe/server is started on that VM right now, waiting for us to connect. We are going to connect to that, and it's going to have that communication with our code, writing, sending that to that VM, the VM building that and sending us the results back. Basically, that's what this is all about. So you can see it's already coming up. So this is not a big project, of course, but still our code space is pretty snappy because we have a hot pool of VMs that we can switch around, of course, to do that. You can again see all the files here, and I should select a startup item. I can do that right here, and whenever I run this from here, then we should see the same project coming up again as well. One failed. That is awesome. NuGet package restore. So maybe I should. Oh, I don't have a solution. So I am not. We also have an integrated terminal right here. I think I have some time, so I'm just going to try and fix this live. Let's just do that. So I think I need to do .NET restore, right, to restore all the NuGet packages. Apparently that is something that happens automatically in VS Code, and now it says error because I have to specify some things. Okay, so let's check out .NET Web. I need to go into the right folder, .NET restore. I'm confident I can fix this while hundreds of people are watching. No pressure at all. Is this also how code on WSL works? Not entirely understand the question. How code on WSL works. Because do you mean like the actual code or VS Code? Because VS Code, is just a cross-platform thing. So that can run on Linux natively, or Windows or Mac or whatever. So please, Bart, if you're hearing this, specify more details. Okay, restore to NuGet packages. Let's try again. Build, do it. Okay, it's building. It's doing something at least. One succeeded. Okay, and we're getting a terminal running the actual thing. Can I also get a browser showing it? Oh, a file not found exception. That's interesting. Okay, well, anyway, normally whenever you have some sense of what you're actually doing, this should just work. VS Code uses a server inside WSL. Oh, okay, yeah. So that there's of course also just like how this works, there's also a VS Code server. I would not be surprised if that runs natively as well. So I'm not sure why that would use WSL because that runs in a container, in a Linux container. So that should just run natively, unless I'm still not understanding what you're trying to ask or say here. Anyway, I think I have a couple of slides to wrap this up. I think I have a couple of minutes to just do that. So what we've just seen, a fully featured development environment in the cloud, powered by mostly VS Code, but we've also VS 2019 in the works, so that is going to be really, really awesome. It has a built-in debugger and runner, so you can just run all the things unless you hit exceptions and you don't know what you're doing. The automatic git config and GitHub login. So this is so integrated with GitHub right now that all the GitHub bits will work. Of course, before the question comes, we're also working to integrate, not integrate, but let's say to make it work with Azure DevOps URLs, because that's also a big part of what we still do. It won't have that integrated look and feel just like in GitHub, or maybe it will actually. I just should stop talking here. I don't know how it will work. But what I do know is that you can input also in Visual Studio 2019, input a Azure DevOps URL, and that will just work. I'm not sure how that's going to look like on the GitHub thing. If you get some maybe customization screen where you can also paste in a custom URL, because in GitHub it's not right now working based on the GitHub repos and just the integration with that. So I'm not sure how the UI is going to look like, but it's definitely something that already works. apps. Personalization through dot files and dev container, and also the settings sync, and even some more possibilities that you might find, because there's multiple things to do, ways, and just figure out the best way that you want to do all these things and personalize your experience. And probably some other stuff that I'm forgetting right now, but we've seen it all. Of course, this is just the start. There is much more to come, because the question was already there, like, how do we do desktop apps? Do we do app casting? How do we, maybe figure out some other way to transport that to our local environment? Those are all things that are set in the future. They might come. I don't know when. I don't own the roadmap, so I have no clue. I'm just a developer. I don't know. Different configurations, so maybe GPUs for AI-enabled applications, of course, Windows and some other different specs. So, along a couple of axes, like more cores, less cores, more RAM, those kinds of things. Full support for organizations. I think that might already be there or not, because when you're using this with GitHub organizations, GitHub Enterprise, you want to have this in your organization and not on a user level. Also, with all the billing and pricing information, that is much more interesting than having it on a user level. So that is, of course, going to be integrated as well. Desktop app support already mentioned, and much more. Learn more. So the demo repository is on that link that is right there. That's the one that I've been using. There are some docs right now on the GitHub docs.github.com. Developing with Codespaces. All the information and sign up is on github.com/features/Codespaces. And there is a session from the GitHub Universe, which is a conference by GitHub, from my dear colleague Alison Weens, who did the thing like beyond the basics. So she has a couple of tips and tricks if you want to go to beyond the basics and you already have access and you want to get more out of this. Then there is one thing left for me to do. That is a big thank you. And I know Eduard wants to break in and say, what is that question for the audience? Well, I'm going to beat you to it, Eduard. I'm going to say, I have a question for the audience about my session. And you have to tweet that. And of course, first follow @4Dotnet on Twitter and tweet the answer to this question with the hashtag 4DotNetConf. And the question I have prepared for you is, what is the name of the repository that will automatically personalize our environment when it is available in your GitHub account? That's all I have for you. So, Eduard, tell me, are there any questions that I've missed? Anything else?
Well, Gerald, you actually beat me to it instead of Eduard, but that's okay.
There we
go.
That's
definitely
also
okay.
Good.
Doesn't matter. No, I think you actually already answered all the questions we had in YouTube and Twitter. So we are through with the questions. So it leaves me to thank you, Gerald, for this awesome session. I'm really looking forward to actually start using the stuff because I haven't yet. But I see the potential here. It's going to be big in the future. I'm sure of that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again soon, and then hopefully in real life again doing a presentation with us or somewhere else. Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. That brings us to the answer to the question that I was asking when my session was done. And that question was, what other ways are there at your disposal to talk to and use the Azure Resource Manager? And there were a couple of correct answers on Twitter. But the one that I picked as actually the correct answer, and the one who wins the YubiKey key thingy, is Patrick Boner. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
No, there's 2 dots on the O. It's Boner.
Boner,
yeah.
Right. Well, Patrick Boner, you won. It's your prize. Because your answer actually contained a nice detail that I forgot to mention during my session. And that is that all the approaches you have, like PowerShell, the Azure CLI, and the Azure Portal, actually use the REST API underneath to call into the Azure Resource Manager to do that work. So your answer was correct and contained a bit of detail. So the prize is for you.